Hello, my name is Andrew Smith. I am a first-year student in Simon Fraser University's Computing Science program, and today I will be doing a presentation titled One Door Closes and Another Opens. The Woebot will see you now. The first half of this presentation is going to go over some background information, and that is the history and current events page you see there. And then the second half will focus on more controversial aspects. For history, essentially that's going to be a history, of course, on AI, but focusing mostly on chatbots with a psychological twist. It's going to begin with Alan Turing and end up somewhere around the creation of Talkspace. For current events, I'm going to go over what a psychological therapeutic chatbot is, as well as explaining some of how they actually go about therapizing you. Afterwards, then, we get into the next section, which is controversy. Initially, I am going to only show one side of the argument, which is the pros, and then afterwards I'm going to counter it with some more skepticism. There's going to be some cons and just some things to think about. Then we will wrap everything up in the conclusions, and if you have any questions, they will be answered in the Q&A section. In 1950, Alan Turing published his paper called The Imitation Game. Nowadays, the contents of this paper are known as the Turing test, and because of its influence, he is known as the godfather of chatbots. And 16 years later, Eliza was created. This is known as the first chatbot, even though it's likely just the first publicly known chatbot. It worked by employing a method of Rogerian therapy, which essentially means when you messaged or told it something, it would spit it back at you and force you to consider that, and then in turn respond. And essentially, you're just talking to yourself. It does this by attempting to interpret the human language, but it only has like 200 handcrafted responses. And because of this, it's not very sophisticated and did not pass Turing's test. However, the next chatbot, Perry, did. Perry was supposed to imitate a schizophrenic person, and the creator, Mark Kolbe, wanted to create this because he felt that the method of gathering data in the psychiatric field, he was a psychiatrist, was rather, it was flimsy, it wasn't absolute, and so he wanted to create a sort of mental map of a schizophrenic person, in this case, so then you can study how they would respond in such instances and perhaps gather harder information because it's a computer, it's defined, essentially. However, these prospects it seems like there's a good trend of psychiatric AI advancement, but after this, the industry began to turn towards object-oriented AI. And these can be likened to Siri or Alexa, as in, like, you ask for it to perform a task, and it does. So, like, for example, hey, Alexa, play my favorite song, and then it does if it's connected to your Spotify account. However, in around 2012, a website called Talkspace began to open up. And they essentially, it wasn't an AI, but it did renew interest in the field, in the first technology. And what it did was it had a bunch of therapists kind of already under their wing, and if a user signed up and paid for their premium plan, they could get in contact with one of these therapists. And then afterwards there's a bit of a boom with chatbots such as Woebot and Tess being created. They will be discussed more in the next section. So, what are therapy bots? Current events. No. Current events. What are therapy bots anyways? The term can also be used, therapy bots, interchangeably with automated therapy, and somewhat with talk therapy, but talk therapy refers to talking mostly to another person, not in person, like through phone, texting, whatever. Okay. So generally, that kind of alludes to what a therapy bot actually is. And it is, you download an app, or you can contact some through just any messaging service, and it gets you in contact with a artificial intelligence, which is designed to teach you and guide you through certain exercises which lessen any mental burden that you may be experiencing. Typically, they use cognitive behavioral therapy, which is also known as CBT. So, what is cognitive behavioral therapy? So, it's similar to self-help in a sense, as it guides the user and makes them sort of re-examine any what they call distorted thoughts, which is negative thoughts that is affecting mood and action. And then they get the user to sort of think it through and be like, is that true or not? Typically, no, it's not true, and then kind of change their thought process to reevaluate, to reflect this newfound truth, and it teaches you mental resilience as well as lessens anxiety as you kind of gain new thought patterns rather than the previous toxic ones. But personality-wise, so personality. Personality of the chatbots has a few sort of key characteristics that they all share, even though they are made by different developers. They all are very accommodating and have a sense of humor, though depending on the chatbot, that's very hit or miss. Apparently, Wobot can be quite funny. Um, but there are some instances, of course, where people complain that the chatbots are responding in a rather robotic method, and given how new the technology actually is, that's not totally shocking. But they aren't all the way there to just being entirely human yet, which would be kind of revolutionary. So, how do they deliver content? Content delivery, looking especially at Wobot, happens daily, and it goes through 10-minute exercises where once you actually start it, you're asked to pick your mood out of 3 emojis. Afterwards, then they guide you through various mental exercises and can occasionally just decide to send you a video, which is for further guidance and knowledge. Otherwise, other apps sometimes make you do meditations or yoga exercises as well. One side of the debate will have you to believe that therapy bots are the future, no ifs, ands, or buts, largely because of the accessibility and how easily accessible they are. This is because therapists nowadays are in incredibly short supply. With the entire healthcare system, just COVID kind of put a bunch of stress onto everything. But for like a chatbot like Wisa, you can just download it off of the App Store right now, no wait time, for free. There is a premium plan, but you don't have to get that, and have access to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is better off than nothing. But then in the future, there's also the potential, as this sector is expanding, there is the potential for these things to grow and expand into other avenues of behavioral therapy. And also, therapists on their own recommend using them, so there isn't really a good reason not to. And the last section, skepticism, in which we learn that there are actually plenty of reasons to not want to use these bots. First of all, information privacy. Let's use an example for this one. So, Wobot. Wobot, I've mentioned it before. There are actually plenty of studies that say that using this is more beneficial than reading a self-help book. But when you sign up for it and read through, it automatically asks you to connect your account with Facebook, and Facebook does not have a very good reputation for protecting security. In fact, they very often get accused at selling it off and giving the user targeted ads. And just for these sort of personal health bots, you're giving away a lot of information, very private information too. And you have to ask, what is this information? Is it being stored? Is it where? Well, they're creating a profile for you, otherwise they wouldn't know, right? So they're storing it, but what are they doing with it? Is it just for myself or something else? And it's especially with other controversies with Talkspace, especially, you need to be careful. Also, this entire industry isn't very well regulated. In the terms and conditions, they say don't sell themselves as therapy bots. They sell themselves as more akin to the self-help books. And so that means they're not necessarily accountable for any of the things that they tell you or any of the actions that you take in response to reading this. There's something called the commercialization gap. And while apps like these are created sometimes by health professionals who want the best for everyone, they're often also created by the private sector, which want you to just engage with it and come back every day so they can get presumably more information to sell off, because these apps are generally free, even though they sometimes do have a paid plan. So that's very fun and interesting. So in conclusion, there are a lot of reasons to not want to use these apps to begin with. Although they can be beneficial, you have to be really, really careful with what you say if you don't want your information being leaked. And you also have to be careful to choose an app that also has science backing it and isn't just made by a bunch of people who want your information. So, in conclusion, what did we learn? Went through a brief history of the chatbots in general and AI. You learned a little bit of that. You also learned what a therapy bot actually is and how they employ their methods of self-help. You also got to learn some of the pros, and hopefully you became skeptical as to the nature of these bots and would do a lot of research into the future of them. There needs to be a lot more research on these apps before they actually are fully integrated into our society. So, any questions? Q&A? Guess not. All right, well, I enjoyed doing this presentation. This topic is very near and dear to my heart. I hope you all enjoyed. Have a good one.